Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. I am Patricia Kong, and today we have Anca, Tanase, Ravi Verma, and Ravi's best friend Olaf participating. They're going to be sharing their experience about scaling beyond Nexus, actually. So scaling Scrum with Nexus, and then beyond that to Nexus Plus. So they're going to talk about 7 lessons. And I think that we have just enough time, hopefully, to get through those lessons. So let's get started. Today, I'm going to be monitoring your questions. Your microphones are going to be muted throughout. The session's recorded, so you can always come back. But pop your questions into the Q&A. And what we're going to try to do, they're going to be going through 7 lessons. We'll try to take questions relevant to those lessons at that time. So try to get them in. And then, of course, probably about 5 to 10 minutes at the end, we'll take some more general questions there. But start getting your questions in as they're talking about each of the lessons. So who's Scrum.org? Scrum.org is the home of Scrum. Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. We are focused on a consistent global community. You can see that we're actually all in different places. The 3 of us today who are talking. We're founded by Ken Schwaber, who is the chairman and, of course, co-creator of Scrum. I think of Scrum.org as a place for training, education, and community. That's what this colorful circle represents. So I'm just going to actually kick it really quickly over to you guys, do a quick introduction of yourselves, and dive into the lessons, and I will be watching your questions. All right, Anca.
Thank you. Ravi, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my name is Ravi Verma. I'm a Scrum.org PhD and founder and org whisperer at Smooth Apps. And I try to be the class clown at Scrum.org. Anca.
I am Anca Tanase. I am currently head of delivery at Lolatech. Lolatech is a UK-based IT services company. I'm based in Cluj-Napoca, Romania. I have 15 years, well, a bit more of software delivery experience. I've worked for companies in the travel, health, education, and finance, small or extremely large ones. I've tried several different roles, and I was always very passionate about Agile and Scrum. And meeting Ravi a few years ago was definitely a turning point in my career. Through him, I discovered Scrum.org, an amazing community that has provided me a lot of tools to learn and grow professionally and personally. So I am very happy to be here with you today. But let's start with our first lesson. Why skilled? When talking about scaling, a lot of people actually think about a very common misconception, meaning that if we scale because of the number of people. Our companies are growing or are already very big with hundreds or even thousands of employees. Therefore, we need a complex map of process hierarchies, roles, and silos, and suddenly nothing looks very agile anymore. We can think of scaling in terms of scaling the number of employees or the number of people, but if this does not come with value being scaled, then scaling doesn't really do much for the organization or the people in it. So trying to scale agility to thousands of people will always lose some agility. I believe we need to be honest with that. Smaller teams can be agile more easily. So the goal of all agile scaling efforts should be to lose as little agility as possible along the way. And they can do that by laser focusing on scaling value, on scaling collaboration, and on scaling structure. We scale so that more than one team can deliver more value than one single team, because although it seems unnatural, that's unfortunately not always the case. So it happens that you can have multiple teams, but actually they deliver less value than one single team. So we scale not to create more disconnect, we scale not to create more waste, but to provide structure to those unstructured interactions between many individuals. So we have to scale collaboration, and we have to seek to remove dependencies so that we can turn chaos into value being delivered. And utilization rates that are quite common are not actual measures of success, but achieved outcomes. So I think our lesson here was that before you start solutionizing scaling, really think about the why behind your scaling efforts to make it worthwhile, and always be ready to course correct. If there are any questions.
There's a good question just to understand for us, Lola. When we're for Lola Tech, when you're working with clients, what are some of the reasons? And you mentioned employees, and you mentioned just general size, but what do organizations do? Like, what are their reasons usually when they come to you and say, "Hey, we want to scale agile everywhere"? What are some of the reasons that you hear?
I think we will touch a bit on that in our next lessons as well. But I believe there is the said reason, and there is the reason that's not very obvious and that's not present. So in general, a lot of companies want to scale because they have a large number of people. They probably worked in a waterfall fashion or another approach, and they want to scale because they believe that by scaling, they will improve, they will increase the value delivered. So this is the obvious reason. Unfortunately, a lot or some of these companies are also expecting to scale a bit controlled with that. So it starts with value, it starts with the number of people, but then sometimes it goes into the other area with the control and having the complex maps and hierarchies and all that.
Yeah, and Trish, if I may add to something to what Anca is saying, the epiphany I had as I was listening to Anca was the unstated intent, often from executives or management, is there is an unspoken fear and anxiety. And that fear and anxiety is, oh my God, the inmates will start running the asylum, right? Here are all the agile teams, but I have a fundamental concern in my mental model that my team members cannot be trusted. I need control and supervision and visibility. And so a scaling framework becomes a technique for me to exercise control and to over my team members as a stepping stone to managing my anxieties. And true agility or true scaling requires a mental model which says, my fear is not that I cannot control my teams. My fear is that I will control my teams and I will get in the way of bottom-up intelligence, right, Trish? So you often remind us the intent of Nexus is to unleash bottom-up intelligence, unleash the awesomeness of the team. And I feel that a framework like Nexus is more compatible with management whose primary fear or primary risk that they're trying to manage is, my teams are awesome. I did a great job hiring awesome people. Let me make sure that our existing processes and cultures don't get in the way of these awesome people. So let me choose a scaling framework that descales my control and scales up the bottom-up intelligence and the unleashes the awesomeness of the team. So that's something you've got to be crystal clear about, the why, not just the stated why, but the unstated why. And maybe this is a nuance that may be visible to an agile coach or a scrum master, because if the unstated why is, I want to scale control over my teams, it's possible that Nexus might not be the right framework for you.
There is a lot there. Thank you very much. I think there's a lot of good questions coming up, and I think you may have some answers for them around management and buy-in from leadership and other scaling frameworks. But there are a lot of nuggets that I appreciated from both of you, which is this notion of the question of even just generally scaling control. That's a huge statement, right? And also just of the fear of getting actually in the way versus the fear of control. So thank you for that. Let's move on to number 2.
Our second lesson, how do you choose a scaling framework? So there are so many scaling frameworks available that choosing the one to best fit your needs can be quite challenging. Unless you are willing to be very clear and honest about what you are trying to scale. So exactly what we just discussed. Do you want to scale control, or do you want to scale self-management and bottom-up innovation? Most of the agile scaling frameworks may only provide guiding principles, values, and some descriptive suggestions that may help you out how to make changes to the surrounding ecosystem in a way that enables the scaling framework to be effective. So it's just, in the end, they are just frameworks, and that's it. So you have to do the hard work. In our case, we were looking for a framework to help us achieve 5 outcomes. We wanted to scale delivery of valuable features and solutions that the customers want to use. We wanted to scale quality of integrated features and solutions. We wanted to deliver these valuable features frequently and regularly. And we wanted to descale a lot of things, such as waste of time, effort, money, exposure to uncertain, undesirable outcomes. We were familiar with Scrum to some extent, and our company's values were pretty much aligned with Scrum values. So we were determined not to affect those in any way. Therefore, we started looking for an agile framework that would help us achieve the 5 outcomes mentioned before, and to enable fast adoption. So if you are looking for the same outcomes and fast adoption, it can help to look for simplicity, for a framework that people get intuitively. So the more complex the framework, the higher the risk. A framework that does not require organizational changes, a framework that can use what you already have as a building block. So in our case, it was consistency and alignment with single team Scrum principles, values, roles, events, and so on. And it's easy to learn. It's basically a framework that allows faster adoption and therefore will bring faster results. You can scale up simplicity by descaling risk and complexity, but you need to be ready to descale control in order to scale value. And again, that's hard. So focus on the problem you are trying to solve and have the courage to find a solution, an agile framework in our case, that is not more complicated than the actual problem you are trying to solve. So respect people's experience and current knowledge, and be open about the benefits you are looking through scaling. And of course, most important, commit to the long-term well-being and sustainable competitive advantage of your business. And do not commit to a means to the end. So do not commit to the selected framework, but to your end goal.
And Trish, I want to add something here. So first, there are multiple scaling frameworks out there. And intentionally, without getting into names, one of my concerns is I love what Anca said about honesty and consistency. So we had a building block of single team Scrum. People understood single team Scrum. And we did not want to choose a framework which would contradict single team Scrum. So now we are doing this complex tap dance where our practitioners are saying, wait a minute, in single team Scrum, this is the accountability, but in their scaling framework, it's something else. Or this is the event intent of the event, and for scaling, it's something else. So now we are wasting precious cycles arguing about the semantics and the intent of a framework while the competition is eating our lunch. The world is not going to stop and pause until our practitioners figure out our scaling framework. So this was important, honesty, integrity, and consistency, because the less time we spend educating, explaining, haggling about the scaling framework, the more time we have to take care of our customers. So simplicity and consistency between the building block, the fractal, and what you're building on top of it is so important. There's one other thing I want to talk about. When executives are evaluating scaling frameworks, the mindset of an executive and the selection criteria of an executive is very different from the selection criteria of a practitioner. For a practitioner, their day job is not to master scaling frameworks. Their job is, give me something simple. They look at it, I got it, let me execute. They want to deliver value. The executive's mindset is, oh my God, I'm going to enter this complex, scary jungle called scaling. I need a blueprint that will anticipate all of the monsters that are waiting for me. And I need in my blueprint a tool or a weapon to slay all the monsters that are waiting inside of the jungle. And when I was listening to Anca, one thing I realized is executives who have the wrong mindset, incompatible mindset, I shouldn't say wrong, whose mindset might be incompatible with Nexus, what they feel is their biggest weapon to tame the monsters of scaling is the blueprint, is the framework. For executives and management whose mindset is compatible with Scrum and Nexus, their mindset is, my biggest powerful weapon are my people. So now their job is, let me give them the lightest backpack, the lightest survival kit, because they have what they need in their mind to slay the monsters of scaling, right? So there's a difference. Some executives want a humongous picture with lots of details because that's how they control their anxieties. Other executives are like, no, my people have got it. Let me give them the lightest backpack and they'll figure it out.
I think that's those points are really relevant and true in different ways. And I know that from a lot of different companies, there always is that weight of, okay, we need to justify which team we're on, right? Which scaling framework we're going to choose. So, Ravi, we've been through this, and I'm sure Anca you have, but when you are trying to talk about it, how do you make that succinct about, okay, there are different frameworks out there, and I heard you make the point, well, if we know Scrum, let's just start with Nexus because let's not waste any more cycles. But how do you have those conversations with other people who might feel as passionately as you do about, for instance, Nexus, and how do you also have conversations with management who are just nervous because they don't see where they can contribute to this conversation when we start to scale?
Yeah, so in my mind, first, I learned something from Marshall Goldsmith. You cannot make a human being do something they don't want to do. And I'm seeing some questions on the Q&A. What do you recommend for getting buy-in from leadership, especially against other scaling frameworks? The first thing is ask management. So my coach, David Darst, he's taught me a simple question. What do you want? And maybe you may not be as direct. Ask management. What do you want? What do you want from scaling? And if it turns out that management's fundamental needs are incompatible, I have learned from the school of hard knocks to say, thank you for sharing. At this point, based on what you need and what I believe in, it may not be a match. So maybe I can refer you to some other practitioners that I respect who may be able to help you. So first thing is recognize you cannot make a human being do something they don't want to do, and that applies to you, right? I don't want to be the pesky telemarketer calling you in the middle of your dinner to say, use Nexus. I've got just the product. Call now and I'll give you Nexus Plus. Doesn't work. I wouldn't want people doing that to me. I don't want to do that to people. So I think the first thing is realize you can't sell something to a person who doesn't want to buy it, right? Instead of trying to devote energy in terms of how do I sell this to my management, find out what does management want, and are management's goals compatible with my goals, compatible with Nexus goals? If they are, it's an effortless sale. You just contrast. Look, here are the pros and cons of Nexus. Here's pros and cons of framework 2, framework 3, framework 4. What do you want? What's calling you? So that's one point. The second is it's a valid human need to feel needed, to be seen, to be heard, and to have a meaningful purpose. So it's natural that people may feel, wait a minute, you bring in this framework, where do I fit in? How do I contribute? And in my mind, the way I reframe the role of management, whether it is in single team Scrum or it is in scaled Scrum, is I tell management, you are the chief impediment destroyers. Without you, the team is not going to survive. We have decades of institutionalized culture in the form of processes and controls in our company. And now we're going to build some amazing teams, and they will go and start running fast, but they're going to keep running into the walls and barriers of the existing systems, processes, and controls that used to work in the past, but will not work. And nobody other than you is better equipped to destroy these walls and barriers and unleash the awesomeness. So I truly believe in my heart, management has a greater role as servant leaders when you introduce single team Scrum and scaled Scrum than they would have in the traditional waterfall command and control structures. So if I can align the intrinsic motivation of management with the game of Scrum and Nexus, suddenly I'm off to the races because they see value in their role. So anyway, those are two questions I thought I heard, Trish. Anca, anything you would like to add from your perspective?
Yes, I fully agree with what you said. I think sometimes you just need to accept that it won't happen. You need to know the objectives of the persons you are dealing with. You need to fully understand them, and you need to accept them. It's okay to fight, but you also need to understand when you have to stop fighting.
That's a great conversation about boundaries. So let's move on. Let's see what challenges you guys faced.
We chose Nexus. We chose Nexus because it is a simple and clear framework, because it builds on Scrum. So therefore, our teams did not need to learn or unlearn too much. Nexus came with a minimal addition of new roles, so reducing confusion. As you can see, the diagram is quite a simple one, so it doesn't take a lot of time to understand it and to determine exactly what you need to feel and where. Nexus helped us avoid disconnects between product owner and the teams and the so-called product owner proxies. And Nexus helped us align the teams to a shared elevating true north. So we have a lot of shared elements in Nexus that helped us all align and work together in that true north direction. So the product backlog created for us a single unified source of shared work. We had shared definitions of done, so a shared transparent standard of quality. We had cross-team refinements to identify dependencies and to align the teams and to reduce the risks. We had the Nexus sprint planning to, again, identify dependencies and to create alignment and plan. We had the daily Scrum to enable us to have daily course corrections. the Nexus Daily Scrum was a bit more challenging for us because it took a while to understand how the Nexus integration team should be working and what exactly that means and who should be in that team. So we tried a lot of experiments, but in the end, we somehow made it work a bit better than in the beginning. We, of course, have the integrated increment. So we did not have to wait to integrate at the end all the components delivered by all the teams. And so we knew every 2 weeks that we have something integrated and we could inspect that, the stakeholders could inspect that. And that helped us reduce cycle time and of course, increase value. We had the Nexus sprint review and that enabled stakeholder feedback and course correction and reduce risk. And of course, the Nexus retrospective. It was a great time for us to get together all the teams part of a Nexus and discuss everything in order to make the teams more effective. So Nexus, in our case, was the solution to our problem. Nexus helped us scale. And it helped us scale self-management and bottom-up innovation. And that was great. Our Nexus evolved to a Nexus Plus, so things became a lot more complex for us. We had 5 Nexuses with at some point over 20 plus teams part of these Nexuses. Adoption happened naturally because we all embraced Scrum and all the benefits the framework was bringing. So the main 3 challenges we were able to overcome by using Nexus as a framework was to try to build teams as cross-functional as we could. So they were not fully cross-functional, but they were getting more and more cross-functional sprint by sprint, to transition from a very common project mindset to a product mindset, and to apply Scrum and the Nexus framework effectively. So Nexus was the solution to our problem, and Nexus helped us. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will be the solution to all the problems in the world, and it will help every company.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a lot of detailed questions for you, Anca.
Yeah, Trish, in the interest of time, I noticed we are almost at the halfway mark, and we're still at question 2. Would it be okay if we try to get caught up and see if we can answer some of those questions at the end?
I think some of those questions are at the end, but there's a couple that I'd like to just ask Anca quickly right now.
All right.
Because I think it's relevant to the time. So one of them is basically about, for instance, the Nexus Daily Scrum, talking about cross-team refinement and Nexus sprint planning and stuff like that. How have you seen that in the implementation, this one or other ones, in terms of that going remote? You know, when we're thinking about the pandemic right now, how do you have those alignment meetings when people are, for instance, I'm assuming if you had 4 Nexuses in the Nexus Plus, people are in different locations. So what did that look like?
Yes, we had teams spread across 3 continents. So for us, it was a lot of the team members were remote. It is indeed a bit more challenging, but it can be done. So there are a lot of tools online that can help you simulate being in front of a whiteboard. There are a lot of tools that can help you track dependencies between items so that you can address them. So yes, perhaps the human connection is a bit diminished because we are all remote, but with the help of the tools available, and if the values, the Scrum values are in place, nothing is impossible.
Excellent. All right, let's move on.
Who should you include in your scaling initiative? After you figure out the why of scaling, the what you want to scale, and the how, the framework, you need to start working on actual implementation. And then the fun starts. As I was saying previously, most of the agile scaling frameworks may only provide guiding principles. so that you can make changes to the surrounding ecosystem, but they are not providing a lot of punctual solutions. And doing that, finding those solutions is hard and takes time and takes curiosity and a lot of resilience. Same as with any type of work, in order for people to be engaged, in order for people to be motivated to accept a change, because we all naturally dislike change. Some of us admit that, some of us don't, but we don't really like change. They need to understand the bigger vision behind it. The goals of the ones involved need to be compatible. Unfortunately, we are all more willing to spend money, but we want to invest time instead of spending it. Therefore, in any initiative, scaling included, it helps a lot to have at least one powerful C-level advocate and the goals of C-suite compatible with the goals of scaling. That sends a very important message. So having that advocate will support and will help you in your cause, in promoting and in creating this and adopting any scaling agile framework. However, that is of course not enough, unfortunately. A scaling initiative needs support from all departments at all levels. Anyone in this ecosystem whose active collaboration and participation is needed in order to achieve desired business outcomes, such as business, IT, interdependent teams, PMO, and so
on. Thank you for that. I think I'm going to ask you in 10 seconds or less, who was your advocate?
I think our advocate was a C-level person that was that understood the benefits Nexus could bring and was willing to invest time by having coaching sessions with Ravi and also by attending our Nexus Plus sprint reviews. So that cadence of accountability was created there. I believe that was our advocate. And of course, it was not the only one.
Yeah, I think that's a whole nother conversation about how to choose and how to coach and talk to your advocate and find advocacy and what happened when that advocacy goes away. But that's for another talk, maybe. Let's move on.
How do you learn about scaling? There are a lot of ways to learn about scaling. Exploration and self-study being one of them. Also, there are so many materials available online, books, articles, case studies, blogs, vlogs. So a lot of them. However, for self-learners, most of our day-to-day activities require us to get our hands dirty by experimenting and investigating things and concepts ourselves. So it's not enough to read about something. You need to try it and you need to see how it works. In our case, working with Ravi, and I already mentioned he's a brilliant coach and mentor with extensive scaling experience, helped us start the journey on the correct path. So he made sure that the right foundation was there and through workshop, and also he was there to answer any of our questions discovered during self-study. And most importantly, I think it was that he encouraged us to use empiricism in our learning. So we were always ready to experiment, to offer transparency on our experiments, and to inspect and to adapt. So that sprint by sprint and sometimes day by day, we were discovering new things to try out. We built a strong community for the Scrum Masters to share knowledge and experience. I think that was a very important thing for us because the Scrum Masters are supposed to be the teachers and the mentors and the coaches. So it's very important to have them trained well enough so that they can support the initiative. It's equally important to have communities of practices for the other team members for enriched development practices in order to increase quality. So we were not afraid to try new things. Sometimes we succeeded, a lot of times we failed. But in the process, we felt that we were becoming better. So not everyone is a good self-educator. Neither everyone can fit in a classroom structure. And no self-study or workshops can replace learning and unlearning by doing. So the fact that there are so many things available online, I think it's called information obesity. It makes it very hard for us to select what information we should take and what information we should abandon. So in the end, it's all about reading, applying, learning something from it, and starting all over.
That application, I know, is something that Ravi is very passionate about when he talks always about the ROI of learning. For either one of you, just really quickly, you brought up a phrase, Anca, unlearning. What does that mean to both of you guys when you're talking about unlearning as professional trainers and facilitators?
To me, unlearning means to always have an open and a beginner's mind. So never be too comfortable that the things you learned are actually the right things, and be ready to change what you really feel strongly about, and to listen to new perspectives, to new ways of doing things. So not being stuck in old habits just because they worked for several years or months.
Yeah, and if I could add to what Anca said, Trish, I think as an agile coach, I've tried to get clarity about the negotiables and the non-negotiables. So in some cases, when I go to a client, they say, well, we are agile, we can do whatever. And then I try to explain to them, agility doesn't mean that anybody can do anything at any time. There are some guiding principles and values. And should we choose a specific framework like Scrum and Nexus, it's important for us to realize what are the non-negotiables. So for instance, DoD is non-negotiable. If I choose Nexus backlog refinement is not negotiable. So I think it's important to distinguish between here are the guardrails, here is the bounded context for self-organization, and there's plenty of room here for autonomy. And now inside of this, we may have a hypothesis. Okay, if I try Nexus daily Scrum in the morning at 8 o'clock, I've got people in Philippines, I've got people in Romania, people in, let's say, California. 8 o'clock is going to work. Then guess what? If there's a lockdown in India and people can't travel to office, or who knows, something happens, maybe what we thought was a valid and plausible hypothesis about the timing of the Nexus daily Scrum when we created it, empirical evidence seems to be suggesting, yeah, not working. Okay, let's unlearn that. Let's not get attached to the idea that I read a blog or in a previous company, Nexus daily Scrum worked at 8 o'clock, therefore it will always have to work at 8 o'clock. I think that's a distinction between negotiable, non-negotiable, learning and unlearning. Some hypotheses do not survive contact with reality. In that case, let's use our true north, the principles and values and the non-negotiables, to find another way, another hypothesis, another experiment, as long as it helps us get to our shared true north.
That's a really good reminder. Thank you for that. All right. 5, 6, and 7.
5. What might impede your scaling initiative? As with any change, scaling efforts will need to overcome a lot of obstacles. A very common one is the organizational culture. Some organizations decide to select an agile scaling framework to scale up self-management or bottom-up innovation and expect to keep the control. Other organizations select an agile scaling framework for scaling control and expect to scale delivery of valuable features and solutions that customers use, or to scale quality. Every organization, I think it's important for us to recognize that every organization comes with its past experience that in some way or the other has shaped their present and continues to shape their future. Because of things that happened in past, people sometimes carry old wounds, fears, resentment, and distrust. And these are not things that can be resolved by any framework. The fear of getting hurt again is a very, very strong feeling. In order to protect ourselves, our brains are equipped to create fortifications. So we create barriers and protections to avoid that, because we really don't like that feeling. So understanding and respecting a company's history is key in understanding the organizational culture. So I think a lot of times we are focusing on, well, this is the culture, but we never really try to get to the bottom of it and understand how that culture was actually created, because in most of the cases, it was created in time because of things that happened in the past. So respect for different points of view and the ability for compromise while keeping the end goal in mind is essential. But cultures can exist on many different levels. So patterns in behavioral norms and values can also exist at the national or regional level. So this influences how people respond to change, so stability versus flexibility, or how people interact, independence or interdependence. So recognizing the potential influence of the external environment on workplace behavior is critical. Besides the cultural and the historical aspects, chasing fast results is another aspect that can become a barrier in any scaling initiative. Change takes time. Results might not be visible in the first 2 weeks. So the needle might be moving slow, but as long as it is moving, you are on the right track. So you need patience, you need resilience, you need to in order to get to good results, you need to wait for them, you need to work for them.
How do you set up that expectation that it's going to take a little bit of time with not only the management, but also the teams?
I believe by being completely honest upfront, by just saying it. You need to be explicit from the beginning.
Excellent.
Yeah, just tell them it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets a little better. It's bumpy. And, you know, so I think maybe some Scrum.org. Actually, I'll tell you a short story. I tried to ski when I used to live in Denver. I tried once and I never did it again. And I went to complain to all my colleagues who used to love skiing. And one of my friends, David Thompson, said, can you name one thing that was worth doing that you learned instantaneously? So maybe that's what you tell people. It's not easy. It's worth it, but it's not easy. Is the end goal worthwhile for you? Is it the right thing to do, right? As Ken Schwaber says, do the right thing and the results will follow. Is it the right thing? Then the question is not about, is it easy? Is it taking too long? Is this the best thing for us to do to meet our true north? And if it's the right thing, if it's the best thing, let's keep chipping away.
Well, we have questions coming in about KPIs and success and measurement. So Anca, I think you have some lessons that you and Ravi are going to talk about next there.
Yes. But first, let's go into how do you overcome these barriers. So before you can overcome any barrier or any obstacle, you need to be aware that it exists. So that's the first step. If you don't know it's there, you cannot do anything to overcome it. Cultural awareness, understanding and accepting the past, acknowledging the situation, learning from our mistakes, and then moving forward towards our shared goals are the ingredients needed to overcome most barriers. Every organization is a very complex adaptive system. You need to think about the problem in your specific context, because contexts are different. There is no silver bullet, unfortunately. As I was saying previously, what worked for one company might not work for your company. What worked for one team might not work for all teams, and so on, because we are all extremely different as individuals, as companies, as countries, and so on. But in order to establish what works or doesn't work for you, you need to experiment, and you need to accept that not all experiments will be successful ones. So Kaizen is mainly about making small, consistent efforts. They require commitment and trust, but they bring extremely powerful results. So we tried a lot of them, from changing the facilitation techniques to our events, to moving gradually from component teams to cross-functional teams. Experiments meant to help us remove dependencies, to enhance collaboration, to set better sprint goals, to create better definitions of done. A lot of them failed, but we kept trying, and we did not give up. Although occasionally we really felt the need to, but we didn't. In order to rebuild trust, we created a cadence of transparency and accountability, meant to rebuild it by getting the right people exposed to the mechanics so that they could contribute, the impediments so that they could help remove them, and the results in order to improve collaboration and to regain that lost trust. Nexus Plus sprint reviews offer such opportunities. By seeing what was happening, by being more close to the problems encountered, trust issues were slowly, like extremely slow, but visibly getting better. Build, measure, learn may sound simplistic, but it's been a game-changing technique. So in everything we did, we applied this loop. We time-boxed, we measured results, we built, we delivered, we learned, and so on. And we repeated this cycle over and over again, sometimes day by day, sometimes sprint by sprint. And to end with a quote from Marianne Williamson, trust is very hard if you don't know what you're trusting. So I think the key here is to be as transparent and as truthful as possible with everything you do.
Yeah, and Trish, if I may add to what Anca said, if the history is business thinks IT sucks, IT takes forever to deliver. When they do deliver, it's not what we want. When they deliver what we want, it's full of bugs. And usually IT goes into a dark black hole after we tell them what we need, and IT emerges 6 months, 9 months later, and it's just crap. By us having the C-suite of the company show up to a Nexus Plus sprint review, where 2 or more Nexuses are showing what they did every 2 weeks, we noticed that the number of people in the room, especially from the surrounding business communities who had a past history of distrust and hurt and resentment with IT, the number of people started increasing because the CEO of the company is sending a strong message. I'm the CEO. I'm super busy, but this is important enough for me to show up to. So when the CEO shows up, CEO's direct reports show up, and slowly other people start showing up. And then good, bad, or ugly, whether the Nexus achieved the Nexus sprint goal or not, we are showing up and we are saying transparently, hey, this is what we did. This is what we said we would do. We didn't do it. So just the fact that you're showing up every 2 weeks, it creates a pattern of accountability. It creates a cadence of trust and integrity, and that it elevates the level of trust. because people are showing up. People are talking to each other, IT and business, who would usually business wouldn't talk to IT until UAT. UAT will happen like in 9 months, and you've got 9 months of crap to clean up. Now, 2 weeks, people are giving feedback. If their voice is heard, they come back 2 weeks later. The feedback they gave 2 weeks ago is actually built into the product. It earns trust. Nothing earns trust more than delivery, keeping your word on a cadence, right? So that's one thing I want to add. The other thing I want to add is Ken Schwaber says, Scrum is not going to solve your problems. Scrum is going to put a 1,000-watt flashlight, I'm paraphrasing, a 1,000-watt flashlight on the pre-existing systemic impediments and the inconsistencies between your organizational goals and your organizational capabilities. And Scrum is going to give you a choice. What do you want to do? Do you want to downgrade your aspirations, or you want to upgrade your capability? Choose wisely. There will be consequences. That's what happens in single team Scrum. That's what happens in Nexus. That's what happens in Nexus Plus. And the last thing I want to say is, ultimately, it's about the first line of the Agile Manifesto. I know it's probably not cool these days to say that the Agile Manifesto is still relevant. Agile Manifesto is as relevant today as it was when it was created. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, more so at scale than at single team context, right? So Nexus and Nexus Plus are going to expose, here are things that are not working. And then human beings need to have courageous and compassionate conversations to say, what do we want to do about it? And you can install the best time framework with Jira and whatever you want, the best time process, best time tool. If human beings are not willing to be vulnerable, courageous, and compassionate in service of a shared true north, no damn framework or tool in the universe is going to save you.
You're fiery today, Ravi. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's get to number 7 and then take some questions. Good job. Talking about empiricism and build, measure, learn. I see half of the evidence-based management graphic here. Tell me more.
Yes. How do we measure the benefits of scaling? So there are 2 types of measures that you can use for the benefits of scaling, qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative data can be counted, measured, and expressed using numbers. So this is the data extremely easy to digest. Qualitative data is descriptive and conceptual. So it can be categorized based on traits and characteristics. Things such as engagement from involved communities. You cannot really put a number on that, but you can pay attention, and you should pay attention to that. Employee customer satisfaction. We can perhaps put a number on this one as an NPS, but there are a lot more areas that we need to pay attention to besides just a single number. And of course, regular conversations, feedback are some examples of such measures. So besides measuring the benefits of scaling and suggesting corrective actions, the qualitative measures can also boost employee engagement and productivity. So they are extremely important. For the other type of data, we used evidence-based management. EBM helped us take into account the best available evidence to help us make decisions on ways to improve. You can read more about it on Scrum.org. It was really a game changer for us. So we finally, with ABM, discovered what we need to actually measure it. And that was not velocity. Spoiler alert. I can give you some examples of the areas we were measuring. Return on investment. It's one example. I know there are a lot of formulas. The formula that we were using, we calculated the gross budget spent on building a feature, and Google Analytics helped us calculate how that feature increased revenue, because it was a feature that was selling something. So it was easy to get to this number. We focused a lot on the time to market. So we measure release frequency, customer cycle time, and so on. We went from delivering yearly or twice a year to delivering better software products every 2-3 months. We tracked innovation rate. We saw that rate going up. We tracked defect trends, and we saw that going down. Unfortunately, we did not have al dente back then, so we had to use Excel sheets to track key value measures, but we started using it afterwards and it made a huge difference. So I highly recommend you to give it a try if you are looking for a tool to support EBM. EBM, same as Nexus, came with a learning journey, but every step of the way we discovered something new.
I'm really pleased to hear that. Al dente is a tool that Anca just mentioned that supports EBM thinking. What else do you have here before we want to dive into a couple questions, Anca, Ravi?
Some basic takeaways. So we need to scale value, we need to scale self-management, collaboration, and bottom-up innovation. Ideally not control. We can scale control, but doesn't really bring great results. It's better to select a framework for its simplicity, consistency, and honesty, because that allows faster adoption and better results. We need to identify and work closely with advocates willing to invest not only budget, but also their time in supporting the scaling efforts. Study, get trained, experiment, learn, and most importantly, unlearn by doing. Understand and accept the past to build a better future, and time box experiments, measure results, and be always ready to course correct. This would be a few takeaways. Sorry.
Thank you so much for the takeaways. I know that you wanted to share some resources, so let's do that quickly.
The resources are, of course, the Scrum guide, Nexus guide, EBM guide, the case study. In the case study, you can see a lot more details on our how Nexus Plus was configured, our problem, our challenges, our solutions, and so on. An article Ravi wrote on ways to compare scaling frameworks. If you are curious, there are some really interesting points there. Of course, if you have any questions, you can contact one of us via email, and white paper.
Yeah, this white paper, if I could take a minute, we're just launching it today. That's bit.ly Nexus with Atlassian. And in this white paper, based on this experience with Anca and other companies where I've launched Nexus Plus, we have given you step-by-step instructions on how to enable Nexus using the Atlassian suite. That's Confluence, Jira, Jira Roadmaps, and Jira Service Desk. So if you are interested, take a look at that link and let us know how we can make it better.
Yep, that is a digital white paper. Very interesting stuff. I think we might have time for one or two questions. Some of them are focused really on just the scaling initiative, and some of them are around Nexus. So because we have you here, Anca, I want to ask you, especially because you scaled up to a Nexus Plus situation, how did you guys use the Nexus integration team? Was that something that was helpful for you with how you were scaling?
Definitely. The Nexus integration team had a very important role in identifying and removing dependencies. So yes, it was an important part of our scaling to from Nexus and then to Nexus Plus. The main obstacle or the main challenge for us was to properly define the Nexuses in the Nexus Plus. So to create the best boundaries so that the Nexuses instead of the Nexus Plus could function as independent as possible. That was hard work, and I honestly do not believe that we reached the point in which we were extremely comfortable that the boundaries are just perfect. So it was an ongoing process.
Well, we're hitting on time, and I think that I'm going to, I can't help myself but to leave a couple thoughts. So especially where you're talking about Nexus and boundaries, the problem, there are a lot of solutions out there. The problem with scaling is dependencies. So a lot of solutions are around how do we form feature set teams? How do we do those things? How do we make things smaller? Those are all different ways to address this problem of dependencies. So that's something that Nexus is looking at when we're working toward one thing together. So even, for instance, when you have hardware and software and those things, that's why those events like Nexus Sprint Planning exist and how they've helped. But that's the thing, and I'm just so thankful for you both to keep sharing your stories and the challenges and the successes that you've had. There are a lot more questions here, and we'll make sure that Anca and Ravi get them, and we'll see it to it that they get those answered to you guys, because there's some great questions in here about HR, personnel development, scaling initiatives, which all could be separate webinars on themselves. But thank you very much. Feel free to reach out to Anca and Ravi today. It was great to spend an hour with you all together. Be well and Scrum on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.